My name is Jessica, and I'm 24 years old. What happened 6 months ago completely shattered everything I believed about family loyalty and unconditional love. One moment I was the responsible daughter, who always helped everyone, and the next, I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, watching my own parents drive away with my sister after orchestrating the most devastating betrayal I could have ever imagined. The events that followed didn't just change our family dynamics. They exposed decades of hidden resentment and favoritism that would ultimately lead to the most satisfying revenge I never saw coming. Before I dive into this wild family revenge drama, I'm curious, where are you watching from today? If you're ready for a story that proves karma really does come full circle, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this tale of family betrayal and sweet justice is going to take you on an emotional rollercoaster. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this all unfolds. Now, let me tell you how my perfect family facade crumbled in a single afternoon. Growing up, everyone always told me how lucky I was to have such a close-knit family. The Hendersons were the picture-perfect suburban household. Dad worked as a regional manager at a manufacturing company, Mom was a part-time nurse who volunteered at the church, and my younger sister Megan and I were the pride and joy of their lives. At least, that's what I believed for 24 long years. My parents, Robert and Linda Henderson, had this incredible ability to make everything look effortless from the outside. Our house was always spotless, dinner was served at exactly 6 p.m. every night, and we attended church every Sunday morning without fail. Mom would brag to her friends about how well-behaved and successful her daughters were, while Dad would beam with pride whenever someone complimented us at community events. But behind closed doors, there was always this subtle undercurrent of inequality that I couldn't quite put my finger on when I was younger. Megan, who's 2 years younger than me, seemed to have this magical ability to avoid consequences for anything she did wrong. When she broke Mom's favorite vase at age 8, it was just an accident. When I accidentally spilled juice on the carpet at age 10, I was grounded for a week and had to do extra chores to learn responsibility. As we grew older, the pattern became more pronounced, though I convinced myself it was all in my head. Megan could come home past curfew and get a gentle reminder about being more careful next time. I'd be 15 minutes late from studying at the library, and suddenly there was a whole family meeting about respect and following rules. When Megan's grades started slipping in high school, my parents hired her a tutor and took her on a special weekend trip to motivate her. When I struggled with calculus and asked for help, Dad told me I needed to figure it out myself, because real success comes from independence. The financial disparities were even more glaring, though they were always dressed up as something else. When Megan wanted to join the expensive dance team that required hundreds of dollars in costumes and fees, my parents somehow found the money immediately. When I wanted to take a coding boot camp that could have jump-started my career, suddenly money was tight and I needed to save up for it myself. Megan got a brand new iPhone every time a new model came out, while I was still using a phone that was 3 generations old because it still works fine. College was where things really started to become obvious, even to my optimistic, family-loving heart. My parents paid for Megan's entire tuition at a private art school that cost nearly $50,000 a year, plus her living expenses, plus a generous monthly allowance for supplies and fun money. Meanwhile, I had to take out student loans for state school and worked 2 part-time jobs just to afford ramen noodles and textbooks. But even then, I made excuses for them. Megan's studying art, which is more expensive, I'd tell myself. Mom and Dad know I'm responsible and can handle working while studying. I actually felt proud that they trusted me to be independent, while Megan needed more support. I genuinely believed that their different treatment of us was based on our different personalities and needs, not favoritism. After graduation, I moved back home temporarily to save money while I job hunted. It was supposed to be for 3 months, maximum. But the job market was tough, and my parents seemed genuinely happy to have me around. Mom would tell her friends how wonderful it was to have her reliable daughter helping around the house, while Dad appreciated having someone who could handle household emergencies when they were at work. During this time, I started noticing more subtle patterns. Family photos on the mantel were predominantly featuring Megan, her art school graduation, her gallery showing, her winning some local art competition. My college graduation photo was there, but it was smaller and positioned behind a plant. When relatives called, the conversation was always how's Megan's art career going, first, and then oh, and how's Jessica doing, as an afterthought. The car situation started about 8 months ago. I had been saving every penny from my part-time retail job to buy a reliable used car. After months of research and comparison shopping, I finally found a perfect 2019 Honda Civic with low mileage and excellent maintenance records. It cost me $12,000. Every cent I had managed to save, plus a small loan that I would be paying off for the next 2 years. That car represented so much more than transportation to me. It was freedom, independence, and proof that I could achieve my goals through hard work and determination. I spent hours researching insurance options, budgeting for maintenance, and even took a defensive driving course to get a discount on my premium. Every payment, every responsibility was mine, and I was proud of it. Meanwhile, Megan was still driving the car my parents had bought her for her 16th birthday, a cute little red Honda Fit that she'd managed to accumulate several scratches and dents on over the years. She'd also racked up 2 speeding tickets and had a minor fender bender that my parents quietly paid for without making her contribute a single dollar. The family dynamic seemed stable, if imperfect. I was the responsible one who helped with groceries, did extra chores without being asked, and never caused drama. Megan was the creative free spirit who brought excitement and unpredictability to our orderly household. My parents loved us both, just differently. Or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that this carefully maintained balance was about to be shattered by a single request that would reveal the true nature of my family's priorities. A request that seemed simple on the surface, but would expose years of built-up entitlement, favoritism, and manipulation that had been carefully hidden beneath layers of family love, and "we are all in this together" rhetoric. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs that I missed or explained away. The way conversations would pause when I walked into a room. The way Megan would smirk sometimes when my parents praised my independence and responsibility. The way my achievements were celebrated with a dinner at home while hers was celebrated with expensive restaurant trips and shopping sprees. But hindsight is 20/20, and at the time, I genuinely believed that we were a loving family who supported each other unconditionally. I thought that being the dependable daughter was a role I had chosen, and that brought me respect and appreciation. I had no idea that it had actually made me the family scapegoat, the one who could be counted on to sacrifice for everyone else's benefit, and who would never fight back, because I valued family harmony above my own interests. That illusion was about to be destroyed in the most brutal way possible. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when everything started to unravel. I had just gotten home from my shift at the electronics store where I worked part-time while job hunting, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening of updating my resume and applying for positions. The spring air was crisp, and I remember feeling optimistic about a promising interview I had scheduled for later that week. As I walked through the front door, I immediately sensed something was different. There was an energy in the house, a kind of charged anticipation that made my stomach flutter with unease. Mom was bustling around the kitchen with more intensity than usual, and I could hear Dad and Megan having what sounded like a serious conversation in the living room. "Jessica, perfect timing," Mom called out in that overly bright voice she used when she was about to ask for a favor. "Can you come into the living room? We need to have a family discussion." The phrase "family discussion" always made me nervous. In our household, it usually meant that something had gone wrong and they needed my help to fix it, or someone needed something from me. But I plastered on my usual cooperative smile and walked into the living room where Dad was sitting in his recliner, and Megan was curled up on the couch with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sit down, honey," Dad said, gesturing to the empty spot on the couch next to Megan. There was something in his tone that immediately put me on alert, a kind of forced casualness that didn't feel natural. Mom joined us, perching on the edge of her favorite armchair with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The atmosphere felt formal and strange, like we were about to discuss something monumentally important. My mind raced through possibilities. Had someone lost their job? Was there a health issue? Did Megan get in trouble with something serious? "So," Dad began, clearing his throat, "you know how Megan has been doing so well with her art career lately." I nodded, though "so well" seemed like a generous interpretation. Megan had sold exactly 3 paintings in the past year, all to family friends who felt obligated to support her. She'd also started a small online business selling handmade jewelry, but as far as I could tell, it was barely breaking even. "Well," Mom chimed in, "she's gotten this incredible opportunity that could really launch her career to the next level." Megan finally spoke up, and there was an excitement in her voice that made my unease deepen. "There's this amazing art fair in Portland next month. It's a huge deal, Jess. Some really important gallery owners and collectors attend, and I could make connections that would completely change everything for me." "That sounds great," I said cautiously, wondering why this required a family meeting. "Portland's not that far from here. You could drive up for the weekend." The 3 of them exchanged glances, and I felt my stomach drop. There was something they weren't telling me, something that involved me in a way I wasn't going to like. "Well, here's the thing," Dad said slowly. "Megan's car has been having some issues lately. You know how unreliable it's been getting." This was the first I'd heard of any car troubles, but I nodded anyway. "And this art fair," Mom continued, "it's not just a weekend thing. Megan would need to be there for almost 2 weeks. She'd need to transport all her artwork, set up a booth, stay in Portland for the duration of the event, and then pack everything up and drive back. 2 weeks is a long time to trust that old car," Dad added. "Especially with such valuable cargo." I was starting to see where this was heading, and my heart began to race. Surely they weren't about to ask what I thought they were about to ask. Megan leaned forward, her eyes bright with enthusiasm that felt increasingly predatory. "So we were thinking, since your car is so much more reliable and spacious, maybe I could borrow it for the trip." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. I stared at her, then at my parents, waiting for someone to laugh or say, "Just kidding." But their expressions were completely serious, expectant even. "Borrow my car?" I repeated slowly. "For 2 weeks. I know it's a big ask," Mom said quickly, "but this could really be Megan's big break. You know how hard she's been working on her art. And you're so responsible," Dad added. "We know you'd want to help your sister succeed." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost found myself nodding along. Almost. But something inside me rebelled against the assumption that my needs were automatically secondary to Megan's dreams. "What about my job?" I asked. "How am I supposed to get to work without my car?" "Oh, that's no problem," Mom said dismissively. "I can drop you off on my way to the hospital, and Dad can pick you up on his way home. Or you could take the bus sometimes. It'll be an adventure." An adventure. She was calling my 2-week dependence on others for basic transportation an adventure, like it was some kind of fun challenge instead of a major inconvenience that would affect every aspect of my daily life. "And what about my job interview on Friday?" I pressed. "The one with the marketing firm downtown." This time it was Megan who answered, and there was something in her tone that made my blood run cold. Can't you just reschedule it? I mean, how important could one interview really be? You've had tons of interviews. The casual dismissal of what could be my career breakthrough hit me like a slap. I had been preparing for this interview for weeks. The marketing firm was exactly the kind of place where I wanted to work, and the position was perfect for my skills and experience. Rescheduling might mean losing the opportunity entirely. Besides, Dad added, you're living here rent-free. This would be a nice way to contribute to the family and help your sister out. And there it was. The guilt trip that had been working on me for my entire life. The suggestion that I owed them something for the privilege of being their daughter, for the room and board that they offered while I searched for a job in an increasingly difficult market. I felt the familiar pull to cave in, to be the good daughter, who put family first and never made waves. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the casual way they dismissed my job interview, or the assumption that my needs were negotiable while Megan's were absolute necessities. Maybe it was the realization that they'd clearly discussed this entire plan without including me, presenting it as a fait accompli rather than a request. I need to think about it, I said finally. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mom's smile became strained, and Dad's expression darkened slightly. Think about it, Megan said, her voice rising with incredulity. What's there to think about? I'm your sister, and I need help. And you're being awfully selfish, Mom added, though she tried to soften it with a laugh. It's just a car, Jessica. It's not like we are asking you to donate a kidney. But it wasn't just a car. It was my independence, my freedom, my ability to control my own life and pursue my own opportunities. It was the symbol of everything I had worked for and achieved on my own. And in that moment, I realized that they would never understand that. To them, I was just the reliable daughter whose needs could always be sacrificed for the greater good of keeping Megan happy. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, ready to snap. I could feel their expectation pressing down on me, the familiar weight of family obligation that had shaped every major decision of my life. But for the first time, instead of bending under that pressure, I felt something inside me solidify into resistance. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I don't need to think about it. The answer is no. The words seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet living room. Mom's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips, Dad's newspaper rustled as his grip tightened, and Megan's mouth actually fell open in shock. Excuse me, Mom said, setting her mug down with a sharp clink. I said no, I repeated, feeling stronger with each word. I need my car for work, for my job interview, and for my own life. I can't just hand it over for 2 weeks. Megan's shock quickly transformed into indignation. Are you serious right now? This is my career we are talking about, Jessica. My future. And what about my future? I shot back, surprised by the heat in my own voice. That interview on Friday could change everything for me. I've been working toward this opportunity for months. You can reschedule one stupid interview, Megan snapped. I can't reschedule an entire art fair that only happens once a year. Dad leaned forward in his chair, using what I recognized as his reasonable authority figure voice. Jessica, I think you're being a little dramatic here. We are not asking you to give up your car permanently. It's just a temporary loan to help family. Help family, I repeated, feeling years of suppressed frustration bubbling to the surface. When exactly has anyone in this family helped me? When I needed money for that coding boot camp that could have advanced my career, you told me to save up myself. When I was struggling to buy this car, working 2 jobs and eating ramen for months, where was the family help then? Mom's expression shifted from surprise to hurt to angry in rapid succession. That's completely different, Jessica, and you know it. We raised you to be independent and self-sufficient. We thought you'd be proud of achieving things on your own. But Megan doesn't have to be independent and self-sufficient. I asked pointedly. She gets her tuition paid, her living expenses covered, her car problems solved by borrowing mine. Megan is pursuing her passion, Dad said firmly. Art is a challenging field that requires support and investment. Your career path is more traditional. More stable. The word traditional felt like a slap. As if my dreams of working in marketing, of building a career I could be proud of, were somehow less valuable than Megan's artistic ambitions. So because I chose a traditional career, I don't deserve support? I asked. Because I'm responsible and reliable, my needs always come second. That's not what we are saying, Mom interjected, but there was a defensiveness in her voice that suggested maybe it was exactly what they were saying. Megan stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. You know what? Fine. Be selfish. I never thought my own sister would sabotage my career over something as stupid as a car. I'm not sabotaging anything, I said, standing up as well. I'm just not sacrificing my opportunities for yours anymore. Anymore. Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. What exactly are you implying, Jessica? The question opened floodgates I hadn't even realized were holding back decades of resentment. I'm implying that I've spent my entire life being the good daughter who never asks for anything, who always helps out, who puts everyone else's needs first. And what has it gotten me? I'm 24 years old, living at home, working retail, and apparently I'm selfish for wanting to keep the car I saved every penny to buy. We never asked you to sacrifice anything, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. You never had to ask, I replied. It was always just expected. Expected that I'd give up my plans if Megan needed something. Expected that I'd be grateful for scraps of attention, while she got the full focus of your pride and support. Megan's eyes were bright with tears now, but they looked more like tears of rage than sadness. I can't believe you're jealous of me. I thought you were happy for my success. What success? The words slipped out before I could stop them, cruel and cutting. You've sold 3 paintings to family friends, and you live off Mom and Dad's money. That's not success, Megan. That's being enabled. The silence that followed was deafening. I immediately regretted the harshness of my words, but I couldn't take them back. And truthfully, part of me didn't want to. Dad's face had gone red. That's enough, he said in a voice I'd rarely heard from him. I don't know what's gotten into you, Jessica, but this attitude is unacceptable. What's gotten into me, I said, feeling tears of my own starting to form, is 24 years of being taken for granted. Mom stood up, her expression a mixture of hurt and anger. Taken for granted. We've provided you with a home, food, support. You've provided Megan with those things, I interrupted. You've provided me with expectations and guilt trips. How dare you, Megan said, her voice shaking. How dare you minimize everything Mom and Dad have done for you? You're being an ungrateful brat. And you're being a spoiled princess who's never had to work for anything in her life, I shot back. Dad slammed his hand on the arm of his chair. Both of you, stop this right now. But we were beyond stopping. Years of careful politeness and buried resentment had erupted, and there was no putting it back. You want to know the truth? Megan continued, tears streaming down her face now. Everyone has always said how lucky I am to have such a perfect, responsible older sister. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to live up to that? To constantly be compared to someone who never makes mistakes. I stared at her, genuinely shocked. Are you kidding me right now? You've never been expected to live up to me. If anything, I've been expected to live down to your level of responsibility. That's enough. Mom's voice was sharp and final. Jessica, I think you need to calm down and really think about what you're saying. This is your family. Is it? I asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Because families are supposed to support each other equally. Families aren't supposed to have favorites. The accusation landed like a bomb. Mom's face went pale, Dad's jaw tightened, and Megan looked between them with something like dawning realization. We don't have favorites, Dad said, but his voice sounded hollow. Really? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. When was the last time you bragged about my achievements to your friends? When was the last time you surprised me with something nice just because? When was the last time you asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I should want? They had no answer for that. And in their silence, I found the clarity I'd been missing for years. The car stays with me, I said quietly. Find another solution for Megan's art fair. And with that, I walked upstairs to my room, leaving them to process the destruction of our family's carefully maintained facade. The house felt different the next morning. There was a tension in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife, and the usual sounds of our morning routine were muffled by the weight of unspoken anger and resentment. I came downstairs for breakfast to find Mom aggressively scrubbing dishes that were already clean, while Dad sat at the kitchen table with his coffee and newspaper, pointedly not looking up when I entered. Megan was nowhere to be seen, which was probably for the best given how our conversation had ended the night before. Morning, I said tentatively, hoping that maybe we could find some way to move past the ugliness of yesterday. Mom turned around with a smile that looked like it had been carved from ice. Good morning, Jessica. I hope you slept well. The formality in her voice was like a physical blow. This was how she spoke to acquaintances, not to her daughter. Dad finally looked up from his paper, and his expression was no warmer. Your mother and I have been talking, he said without preamble. About your outburst yesterday. I felt my stomach clench. It wasn't an outburst, Dad. It was me finally being honest about how I feel. It was disrespectful, Mom interjected, her voice sharp. The things you said about your sister, about us, that's not the daughter we raised. Maybe the daughter you raised was tired of being taken for granted, I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Dad set his newspaper down with deliberate precision. Jessica, we've decided to give you some time to think about your priorities. Really think about what family means and whether you want to be part of this one. The words sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean? Mom turned back to her aggressive dish scrubbing. We mean that if you're going to live under this roof, you need to act like part of this family. And part of being a family means helping each other out when it matters. So this is an ultimatum, I said slowly. Give Megan my car or else. It's not an ultimatum, Dad said, but his tone suggested otherwise. It's a conversation about values. About what kind of person you want to be. I felt the familiar manipulation settling over me like a heavy blanket, but this time I recognized it for what it was. They were trying to make my reasonable boundary into a character flaw, my need for independence into selfishness. And what if I decide that the kind of person I want to be is someone who doesn't sacrifice her own opportunities for everyone else's convenience? The silence stretched between us, charged with 24 years of unequal dynamics and unspoken expectations. Then I guess you'll have to figure out what that looks like, Mom said finally, not turning around. I waited for Dad to contradict her, to soften the blow, to be the reasonable mediator he usually pretended to be. But he just picked up his newspaper again, effectively dismissing me. The message was clear: conform or face the consequences. I spent the rest of the morning in my room, alternating between fury and heartbreak. How had my simple refusal to lend my car turned into a referendum on my worth as a family member? How had my parents, who I'd loved and respected my entire life, become people I barely recognized? Around noon, I heard Megan come home, followed by the low murmur of intense conversation downstairs. I caught fragments through my thin bedroom door, words like ungrateful, selfish, and time to learn. The tone was conspiratorial, like they were planning something. An hour later, Mom knocked on my door. "Jessica, can you come downstairs? We have something to discuss." My heart was pounding as I walked down to find all three of them waiting for me in the living room, their expressions ranging from determined to smugly satisfied. It felt like walking into an ambush. "Sit down," Dad said, and this time it wasn't a request. I remained standing. "What's this about?" Megan spoke first, and there was something different about her demeanor. A confidence that hadn't been there yesterday. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I need to be more independent and self-sufficient." I waited, sensing a trap. "So I've decided to take responsibility for solving my own transportation problem," she continued. "I am going to drive myself to Portland." "Okay," I said slowly. "That sounds reasonable." "In your car," she finished. My blood turned to ice. "Excuse me." Dad leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen, Jessica. Tomorrow morning, we are all going to drive out to visit Aunt Carol. It's about a 3-hour drive, and we'll make a day of it." Aunt Carol lived in the middle of nowhere, in a tiny rural town with poor cell service and limited public transportation. I hadn't seen her in over a year. "That sounds nice," I said cautiously, "but I have to work tomorrow." "I already called your manager," Mom said casually. "Told him you had a family emergency and wouldn't be in for a few days." The pieces of their plan were becoming horribly clear. "You did what?" "Don't worry," Megan said with a smile that made my skin crawl. "I'll drive us out there in your car, since mine is having those reliability issues we mentioned. And then Mom and Dad will ride back with me, and you can spend some quality time with Aunt Carol. Give you some space to think about things." "You're going to strand me at Aunt Carol's?" I asked, incredulous. "We are giving you an opportunity for reflection," Dad corrected. "Away from all the distractions and stress of job hunting and city life. Aunt Carol would love the company, and you two have always gotten along well. And how exactly am I supposed to get home? Aunt Carol doesn't even have a reliable car." "There's a bus that comes through town twice a week," Mom said helpfully. "Or Aunt Carol's neighbor might be able to give you a ride to the nearest town with better transportation options." "This is insane," I breathed. "You're essentially kidnapping me." "We are helping our daughter gain some perspective," Dad said firmly. "Sometimes when people are being unreasonable, they need time and space to realize their mistakes." I stared at them in horror. These people who had raised me, who had taught me about right and wrong, about treating others with respect and kindness, were calmly planning to abandon me in a remote location because I wouldn't give up my car. "And while you're gone," Megan added, clearly unable to resist twisting the knife, "I'll take good care of your car. I promise to only put premium gas in it." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was already talking about my car like it belonged to her, like this elaborate manipulation was just a formality before she claimed what she felt entitled to. "You can't do this," I said, my voice shaking. "This is kidnapping. This is theft. This is family," Mom said coldly. "And sometimes families have to make hard choices to help each other grow." I looked around the room at these three people, who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to have my back no matter what. Instead, I saw strangers wearing familiar faces, people who had apparently been capable of this level of manipulation and betrayal all along. "I won't get in the car," I said. Dad's expression hardened. "Then you can find somewhere else to live. Tonight." The ultimatum hung in the air like a sword. Either participate in my own betrayal, or be thrown out with nowhere to go and no resources to fall back on. I thought about my savings account, emptied to buy the car they wanted to steal. I thought about my limited job prospects and my upcoming interview. I thought about how completely they had cornered me, cutting off every escape route with calculated precision. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll come to Aunt Carol's." The relief on their faces was almost insulting. Like they'd been worried I might actually have enough self-respect to call their bluff. "Good," Mom said, her warmth returning now that she'd gotten her way. "We'll leave first thing in the morning. It'll be nice to have some family time together." Family time. As if planning to abandon your daughter in the middle of nowhere was just another fun family bonding activity. As I walked back upstairs, I realized that everything I'd believed about my family had been a lie. The love I thought was unconditional had conditions. The support I thought was guaranteed had strings attached. And the people I thought would always have my back were perfectly willing to stab me in it when I didn't comply with their demands. But what they didn't know was that their betrayal was about to set in motion a chain of events that would give me something I'd never had before. Complete clarity about who they really were, and the motivation to finally put myself first. The morning of what I would later think of as the abandonment dawned grey and drizzly, as if the weather itself was reflecting the doom I felt in my gut. I had barely slept, spending most of the night alternating between disbelief at what my family was planning and desperate attempts to figure out a way to escape their trap. I had considered several options: calling in sick and refusing to go, packing a bag and leaving before they woke up, or even calling the police. But each plan fell apart under scrutiny. I had nowhere else to stay, no money for a hotel, and no guarantee that the police would see this as anything other than a family dispute. My parents had been careful to frame this as a voluntary family visit, and technically I had agreed to go. At 7 a.m. sharp, Dad knocked on my door. "Time to go, Jessica. Aunt Carol is expecting us by noon." I dragged myself out of bed and threw some clothes into a small overnight bag, still hoping against hope that this was all some elaborate bluff designed to make me change my mind about the car. Surely they wouldn't actually go through with abandoning their own daughter in the middle of nowhere. Downstairs, Mom was bustling around the kitchen, packing a cooler with sandwiches and snacks for the road. She was humming cheerfully, as if we were heading out on a pleasant family adventure instead of executing a carefully planned betrayal. "Morning, sweetheart," she called out brightly. "I made your favorite, turkey and Swiss with that mustard you like." The casual normalcy of it made my stomach churn. How could she act so caring and maternal while plotting to strand me 3 hours from home? Megan appeared in the kitchen doorway, jingling my car keys with obvious satisfaction. "Ready for a fun family road trip?" I wanted to snatch the keys from her hand, but I knew it would only escalate the situation and possibly result in them following through on their threat to kick me out immediately. At least if I played along, I'd have 3 hours in the car to try to talk sense into them. "Let me drive," I said, reaching for the keys. Megan pulled them back with a laugh. "Nice try. I'm the designated driver today." The symbolism wasn't lost on me. She was literally taking control of my life, my independence, my ability to escape the situation they'd created. The drive started out tense, but relatively normal. Dad rode shotgun while Mom and I sat in the back. They made small talk about Aunt Carol, about the weather, about anything except what was really happening. I kept waiting for one of them to admit this was all a terrible joke, to turn the car around and head home. But as we got further from the city, as the buildings gave way to farmland and the cell phone signal grew weaker, the reality of the situation began to sink in. They were really going to do this. About an hour into the drive, I tried one last appeal to reason. "Mom, Dad, please reconsider this. I have that important job interview on Friday. This could really hurt my career prospects." Dad turned around in his seat with an expression of exaggerated patience. "Jessica, maybe if you'd been more willing to compromise yesterday, we could have found a solution that worked for everyone. What compromise? I asked. You never suggested a compromise. You made a demand and expected me to comply. We suggested that Megan could use your car for her art fair, Mom said. That seems pretty reasonable to me. Reasonable would have been asking what might work for both of us, I replied. Maybe helping Megan rent a car, or finding another way for her to get to Portland that didn't require sacrificing my transportation for 2 weeks. Megan glanced at me in the rearview mirror, and I caught a flash of something that might have been guilt before her expression hardened again. Some things are more important than convenience, Jessica. This art fair could change my entire life. And missing my job interview could change mine, I shot back. But apparently your life changes matter more than mine. The car fell silent after that, the tension so thick I could practically taste it. I spent the remaining 2 hours of the drive staring out the window at the increasingly rural landscape, watching my cell phone signal fade to nothing, and trying to process the fact that my own parents were willing to go to these extremes just to force me to give up my car. When we finally pulled into Aunt Carol's gravel driveway, I felt a strange sense of finality, like we were crossing a point of no return. Aunt Carol's house sat on 20 acres of farmland, miles from the nearest neighbor, and even further from anything resembling public transportation. The isolation was complete and deliberate. Aunt Carol came out to greet us, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel and beaming with genuine happiness. She was Mom's older sister, a sweet woman in her 60s who had never married and lived alone with her 3 cats and a vegetable garden that could feed a small army. What a wonderful surprise, she called out, hurrying over to hug each of us. I was so excited when Linda called yesterday. It's been far too long since we've had a proper family visit. I felt a stab of guilt as she embraced me warmly. Aunt Carol had no idea she was being used as an unwitting accomplice in my parents' manipulation. To her, this was just a lovely family visit from relatives she rarely got to see. We spent the next few hours going through the motions of a normal family gathering. Mom and Aunt Carol caught up on family gossip while Dad helped with some minor repairs around the house. Megan and I barely spoke to each other, maintaining a polite distance that Aunt Carol seemed to attribute to typical sibling dynamics. But I could feel the countdown ticking in my head. They were planning to leave soon, and when they did, I would be trapped here with no way to get home in time for my interview, no way to get to work, no way to maintain any semblance of the independent life I'd been trying to build. Around 4 p.m., Dad made the announcement I'd been dreading. Well, Carol, this has been wonderful, but we should probably start heading back. It's a long drive, and we want to get home before dark. Aunt Carol looked confused. All of you? But I thought Jessica was staying for a few days. That's what Linda told me on the phone. The moment of truth had arrived. I looked at my parents, waiting to see how they would handle this. Would they at least be honest with Aunt Carol about what they were doing? Actually, Mom said with that same bright, artificial smile she'd been wearing all day, Jessica decided she'd like to spend some quality time with you. She's been under a lot of stress lately with job hunting and everything, and we thought a little country air might do her good. The lie came so smoothly, so naturally, that I almost admired the skill of it. She'd managed to make their abandonment sound like my choice, like some kind of wellness retreat I'd requested. Oh, how wonderful! Aunt Carol exclaimed, turning to me with delight. We'll have such a nice time together. I can show you the new additions to the garden, and maybe you can help me with that computer problem I've been having. I forced a smile and nodded, not trusting my voice. What else could I do? Tell Aunt Carol that her sister and brother-in-law were essentially kidnapping me. Destroy her happiness at having company, and make her an unwilling participant in our family drama. That sounds great, Aunt Carol, I managed. The next 30 minutes were a blur of goodbyes and promises to call soon. Megan hugged me with what felt like genuine affection, and for a moment I wondered if she was having second thoughts about what they were doing. "Take care of yourself, Jess," she whispered. "And maybe use this time to really think about what's important." Then she climbed into the driver's seat of my car, and started the engine. I stood in the gravel driveway with Aunt Carol, watching my parents and sister drive away in the vehicle I had worked so hard to buy, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere with no transportation, no cell service, and no way to make it to the most important job interview of my life. As the taillights disappeared around the bend in the road, Aunt Carol put her arm around my shoulders. "Come on, dear. Let's get you settled in. I've got a nice pot roast in the oven, and we can have a proper catch-up over dinner." I followed her into the house, feeling like I was walking through a dream, or maybe a nightmare. 3 days ago, I had been a financially independent adult with a car, a job, and a promising interview lined up. Now I was essentially a prisoner in my aunt's house, abandoned by my own family for the crime of refusing to sacrifice my needs for my sister's wants. But as I sat at Aunt Carol's kitchen table that evening, listening to her cheerful chatter about her cats and her garden, something began to crystallize inside me. A cold, hard resolve that felt foreign, but also strangely liberating. My family had made their choice. They had shown me exactly how little my well-being mattered to them, how willing they were to hurt me to get what they wanted. Now it was time for me to make my choice. And I was going to make sure they regretted theirs. The first night at Aunt Carol's house was the longest of my life. I lay in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of rural silence, no traffic, no city noise, just the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of wind through the trees. The isolation felt suffocating, but it also gave me something I'd never had before: complete mental clarity about my situation. I had been abandoned by my own family for refusing to be their perpetual doormat. They had manipulated, lied, and betrayed me with such calculated precision that it took my breath away. And the worst part was how normal they'd made it seem, how they'd convinced themselves, and tried to convince me, that I was the unreasonable one. But as I lay there in the dark, something else began to emerge from beneath the hurt and anger, a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in my life, I had no obligation to consider their feelings, no pressure to maintain family harmony, no need to be the good daughter, who always put everyone else first. They had severed those bonds themselves when they chose Megan's wants over my needs, when they decided that my car, my job, my future were all acceptable casualties in their quest to keep their golden child happy. The next morning, Aunt Carol was bustling around the kitchen when I came downstairs, preparing what looked like enough breakfast to feed a small army. "Good morning, sweetheart," she called out cheerfully. "I hope you slept well. I thought we'd have a nice big breakfast and then maybe take a walk around the property. The weather's supposed to be beautiful today." "That sounds wonderful," I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. Aunt Carol's genuine kindness was such a stark contrast to my family's conditional love that it was almost jarring. As we ate breakfast, she chatted about her neighbors, her garden, and her cats with the kind of contentment that comes from a life lived simply and authentically. But I noticed she kept glancing at me with a slightly concerned expression, as if she sensed something wasn't quite right. Finally, she set down her coffee cup and looked at me directly. "Jessica, honey, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Yesterday, when your parents left, there was something odd about the whole situation. Your mother called and asked if you could stay for a few days, but she seemed very insistent about it. And you looked," she paused, searching for the right words. "You looked like someone who was here against their will." The gentle perceptiveness of the observation nearly brought me to tears. Here was someone who had known me for less than 24 hours, but had still noticed what my own parents had chosen to ignore, that I was deeply unhappy with the situation. "It's complicated," I said carefully, not wanting to burden her with the full truth. Aunt Carol reached across the table and patted my hand. Families usually are. But you know, dear, I've been living alone for a long time, and I've learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are the ones who put the most conditions on that love. The insight was so accurate it took my breath away. Have you talked to Mom much over the years? About family dynamics? Aunt Carol's expression grew thoughtful. Your mother and I have very different ideas about child rearing. I've always felt that she and your father were perhaps a bit harder on you than they needed to be. And softer on Megan than was good for her. So I wasn't crazy. Even from the outside, the favoritism had been obvious to someone who barely saw us once a year. Can I ask you something else? I said. Anything. Do you have internet here? Aunt Carol laughed. Oh yes, dear. I may live in the middle of nowhere, but I'm not completely cut off from civilization. The Wi-Fi password is Carol's Cats 2023 capital CS, no spaces. For the first time since the car ride began yesterday, I felt a glimmer of hope. If I had internet access, I might be able to salvage some of this situation. That afternoon, while Aunt Carol tended to her garden, I settled down with my laptop and began making phone calls. The first was to my job interview. Hi, this is Jessica Henderson. I have an interview scheduled for Friday, and I'm calling because I've had a family emergency that's taken me out of town unexpectedly. The HR representative was understanding but firm. I'm sorry to hear about your emergency, Jessica. Unfortunately, we are trying to fill this position quickly, and Friday was our last available interview slot before we make our decision. My heart sank, but I pressed on. Is there any way we could do a video interview? I have reliable internet access. There was a pause. You know what? Let me check with the hiring manager. We don't usually do remote interviews for this position, but given the circumstances. Can I call you back within the hour? Absolutely. Thank you so much for your flexibility. My next call was to work, to explain the family emergency that Mom had invented for me. Henderson, my manager, answered gruffly. Hi, Mike, it's Jessica. I'm calling about the family emergency my mom told you about. Yeah, how's everything going? She made it sound pretty serious. I took a deep breath and made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. Actually, Mike, I need to be honest with you. There's no family emergency. My parents essentially stranded me at my aunt's house 3 hours from town because of a family dispute, and they told you there was an emergency without my knowledge. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Come again. I know how it sounds. But the truth is, I'm stuck here without transportation because my family is trying to manipulate me into giving up my car. I'm working on getting home, but I wanted you to know the real situation. Jesus, Henderson. That's really messed up. Are you okay? The genuine concern in his voice almost made me cry. Here was my retail manager, someone who barely knew me beyond my work performance, showing more care for my well-being than my own parents had. I'm okay. And I'm going to figure out a way to get back to work as soon as possible. Look, don't worry about the shifts you're missing. Family stuff is complicated, and this sounds like it's way beyond normal family stuff. Just keep me posted, okay? Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate your understanding. My phone rang 20 minutes later. It was the HR representative from the marketing firm. Jessica. Good news. We've arranged for you to do a video interview tomorrow at 2 p.m. Will that work for you? I nearly cried with relief. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Just email me back to confirm, and I'll send you the video link. And Jessica, I hope everything works out with your family situation. As I hung up the phone, I realized something important had shifted. Instead of feeling like a victim of my family's manipulation, I was starting to feel like someone taking control of her own life. I was problem-solving, being proactive, refusing to let their abandonment define my future. That evening, as Aunt Carol and I sat on her front porch watching the sunset, I made another important decision. Aunt Carol, would it be okay if I stayed here for about a week? I'll contribute to groceries and help around the house, of course. She looked surprised but pleased. Of course, dear. But may I ask why? Because I think I need some time away from my parents and Megan to figure out what kind of relationship I want with them going forward. If any. Aunt Carol nodded slowly. Sometimes distance gives us perspective we can't get when we are too close to a situation. Exactly. I paused, then decided to ask the question that had been burning in my mind all day. Aunt Carol, in your opinion, do you think I'm being unreasonable for not wanting to lend my car to Megan? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the colors fade from the sky. Jessica, in my 72 years on this earth, I've learned that anyone who tries to force you to prove your love by sacrificing your well-being doesn't actually love you the way you deserve to be loved. And in that moment, sitting on my aunt's porch in the middle of nowhere, I finally understood what I needed to do. My family wanted to play games. Fine. I'd learned from the best. But they were about to discover that their responsible, reliable daughter had been paying attention all these years. And she was done being the family doormat. It was time for Jessica Henderson to put herself first for once. The video interview the next day went better than I could have hoped. Sitting at Aunt Carol's kitchen table with her flower garden visible through the window behind me, I felt more confident and authentic than I had in years. Maybe it was the distance from my family's constant judgment, or maybe it was the clarity that comes from finally understanding your own worth, but I nailed every question. We'd like to offer you the position, the hiring manager said at the end of our conversation. The salary is $65,000 to start, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. When would you be able to start? 2 weeks from Monday, I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. I just need to handle some personal matters first. After I hung up, Aunt Carol hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning of good things coming your way. She was more right than she knew. That evening, I began executing the plan that had been forming in my mind since the moment my family drove away. I started with a simple Google search: how to report a stolen vehicle. My car was registered in my name. I had all the paperwork, insurance documents, and loan information to prove it. The fact that I had agreed to let Megan take it to Portland under duress didn't change the legal reality that she now had my vehicle without my current consent. I called the police department in my hometown. I'd like to report a stolen vehicle, I told the dispatcher. Can you provide the details? I gave them my car's make, model, year, license plate number, and VIN. The vehicle was taken by my sister yesterday without my permission. She's planning to drive it to Portland, Oregon. Do you know where the vehicle currently is? She should be arriving in Portland today for an art fair. I can provide you with the specific location if needed. What my family didn't know was that I had been tracking my car's location since the day I bought it. The dealership had installed a GPS tracking system as part of the security package, and I had the app on my phone. I could see exactly where Megan was at any given moment. We'll file the report. Given that this involves family members, we'll need you to come in and make a formal statement. I understand. I'll be there as soon as I can arrange transportation. My next call was to my car insurance company. I need to report an unauthorized use of my vehicle, I told the representative. My insurance should not cover any damages, accidents, or incidents involving my car while it's being driven by someone who took it without my permission. I'll make a note in your file, Ms. Henderson. If your sister has an accident or incident, she'll be personally liable for all costs. The third call was to the bank that held my car loan. I need to report that my vehicle has been stolen, I explained. I want to make sure that if anything happens to the car, while it's not in my possession, I'm not held responsible for the loan balance. We'll flag your account, Ms. Henderson. Do you have a police report number? I'm filing the report today. By the time I finished making calls, I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. For once, I was being proactive instead of reactive. I was protecting myself instead of hoping others would consider my needs. The next morning, Aunt Carol's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, offered to drive me back to town. I have to go to the city anyway for a doctor's appointment, she said kindly. It's no trouble at all. The police station was my first stop. Officer Martinez listened to my story with professional sympathy and growing concern. So your family essentially abandoned you to force you to let your sister use your car, he summarized. That's correct. And you have documentation proving the car is yours. I handed over my registration, insurance cards, loan documents, and purchase receipt. This is definitely theft, he said, shaking his head. Family or not, you can't just take someone's car because you want to use it. We'll put out a BOLO alert for the vehicle. What does that mean for my sister? If she's pulled over or if we locate the vehicle, she'll be arrested for auto theft. Given that she's crossed state lines, this could become a federal matter. I felt a momentary twinge of guilt, quickly followed by a surge of satisfaction. Megan was about to learn that actions have consequences, a lesson my parents had never bothered to teach her. My phone rang as I was leaving the police station. It was Mom. Jessica, where are you? Carol said you left this morning. I'm handling some business in town, I said calmly. What kind of business? The kind that involves reporting my stolen car to the police. The silence on the other end was deafening. You didn't, she finally whispered. I absolutely did. Megan took my car without permission. That's theft, Mom. And since she crossed state lines with it, it's now a federal crime. She's your sister. And you're my mother, but that didn't stop you from abandoning me in the middle of nowhere. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. Let them panic for a while. The satisfaction was short-lived, though. Within an hour, Dad was at the police station, red-faced and furious. You need to drop these charges against your sister right now, he demanded. I'm not dropping anything, I replied calmly. Megan stole my car. These are the consequences of that choice. This is insane, Jessica. You're destroying your own family over a car. No, Dad. You destroyed this family when you decided that my needs don't matter. I'm just refusing to be a victim anymore. Officer Martinez appeared at my side. Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. This is a police station, not a family therapy session. This is my daughter, Dad said, gesturing at me. She's making a huge mistake. What I see, Officer Martinez replied, is a young woman who had her vehicle stolen by family members who thought they could get away with it because of their relationship. The law doesn't recognize family exemptions for theft, sir. The call came in 2 hours later. Megan had been pulled over in Portland and arrested. My car was being impounded as evidence. Your sister is asking if you'll reconsider pressing charges, Officer Martinez told me. Tell my sister she should have thought about that before she drove away in my car. That evening, I checked into a hotel near the airport and booked a flight to Portland for the next morning. I had a car to retrieve and a new job to start preparing for. But first, I had one more call to make. Hi, this is Jessica Henderson. I'd like to speak with someone about withdrawing my application for family housing assistance. I'm sorry, Ms. Henderson, but we don't have any applications on file under that name. Interesting. Can you check under Henderson, Linda or Henderson, Robert? Oh yes, here it is. Application submitted last week for emergency housing assistance due to family financial hardship. My parents had applied for welfare while owning 2 cars and paying for Megan's expensive art school. They'd been lying about their financial situation to get government assistance. I'd like to report fraudulent information on that application, I said. Sometimes karma needs a little help. As I sat in my hotel room that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, peace. For the first time in my life, I had put my own needs first. I had set boundaries and enforced them. I had refused to be manipulated and had protected myself when my own family wouldn't. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Jess, it's Megan. I'm sorry. Can we talk? I deleted the message without responding. Tomorrow I would fly to Portland, retrieve my car, and drive back to start my new job and my new life. A life where I was the protagonist of my own story instead of a supporting character in everyone else's. The best part? I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to understand my choices or validate my feelings. I just needed to live authentically and put my own well-being first. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I smiled thinking about the lesson they'd learned the hard way. The responsible, reliable daughter they'd taken for granted had grown a backbone. And she was done being their doormat forever. Looking back now, 6 months later, I can see that being abandoned on that dusty road was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to find my strength, stand up for myself, and discover what I was really capable of when I stopped prioritizing everyone else's needs over my own. Have you ever had a moment where your family's betrayal actually set you free? Where the worst thing that happened to you turned out to be exactly what you needed? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes we find our strength in the most unexpected places. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life tales of family drama and personal growth. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to put yourself first sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the people who truly love you will never ask you to sacrifice your well-being to prove that love. Here's to finding the courage to set boundaries, the strength to enforce them, and the wisdom to know that you deserve better than conditional love. Until next time, take care of yourselves, because if you don't, who will?